Thank you, Mr Deputy Speaker. And I want to start by thanking the honourable member for Warrington South for securing this debate. And I want to say that I agree with everything he said in introducing it. He's completely right to talk about tax in the US and elsewhere. He and the honourable member for Bradford East, completely right as well, to talk about growth of racism on the far right and the dangers of the growth of populist nationalism. As we've just heard, I mean, not just in Solihull, but in Birmingham as well, shocking attacks on mosques in the city, so we all have to be vigilant about this. And I'm in touch with the mosques in Dudley to express my solidarity for Dudley's Muslim community and to ensure that they've got all the security assistance that they need. I'm really delighted that the honourable member for Wolverhampton South West is here, because a year ago, just about a year ago, she and I and the honourable members for Edgbaston and Ladywood stood in the biggest room in the hotel where Enoch Powell, 50 years before, had made his shameful Rivers of Blood speech, and we celebrated the unity and the diversity of communities in the West Midlands. And I've stood, Mr Deputy Speaker, since then with members of the Muslim community in Dudley when they've been targeted by the BNP or the EDL. I've stood up for constituents in Dudley who, as we heard a moment ago, have been, like elsewhere in the country, were victimised as a result of their status as part of the Windrush generation. But, Mr Deputy Speaker, I do have to say this, this is another anniversary today. It's an anniversary pretty much almost to the day that Britain's Jewish community came together in the square across the street to protest against racism in the Labour Party. And I'm afraid we do have to address ourselves to this, because I think that we lose our legitimacy to complain about other people's racism if we're not prepared to deal with the problems we find in our own party. And I just want to say this, I want to tell the House about Susan Pollock. Born in 1930 in Hungary, imprisoned as a teenager in Auschwitz, spends her time now travelling the country, telling young people about the evils of racism and prejudice. I first met her when she came to Dudley to talk at our annual Holocaust commemoration. The second time I met her, an Auschwitz survivor in her late 80s, was in that demonstration across the road, the first ever political demonstration she'd been on in her life. And it was against, well, it was, I've left the Labour Party, but, I spent, 35 years in it. I found it a deeply shocking and shameful thing. And I think it's terrible that a culture of extremism and anti-Semitism has resulted in the Labour Party being investigated by the Equality and Human Rights Commission. I think that's a really, really shocking thing. And this weekend, as we've heard, in the Sunday Times, a failure to take proper disciplinary action against hundreds of members accused of anti-Semitism. People who said things like Heil Hitler, F the Jews are the problem. They've not been expelled. Absolutely shocking. Even though complaints about this were received a year ago, a councillor in Lancashire led back into the party after fuming about Jewish media attacks and the Rothschild family. Last August, I complained about, if I complained about everybody who said this sort of stuff to me, you'd have no time to do anything else. But I did complain about one member last year because he also threatened violence at my office, which is in a building which also contains a women's aid centre. Now, this guy, he questioned the numbers killed in the Holocaust. He said 6 million was a magic number. He told the Jewish community to, quote, put up or shut up. He talked about Zionist scum, and he used really obscene remarks that I wouldn't repeat, Mr Deputy Speaker. I complained about him last August, despite repeated emails and requests. Eventually, unbelievably, he was finally suspended in February, but still a member, as far as I'm aware. I really hope that the party's listening and they will deal with that. The chair of the Jewish Leadership Council, Jonathan Goldstein, I think he was completely right this weekend to condemn what he called the corruption within Labour. He said that those who've covered it up should be relieved of their duties. He said last July, I called the Labour Party institutionally racist against Jews. Today's revelations make clear for all to see just how accurate that statement was. Even the Deputy Leader, Mr Deputy Speaker, the honourable member for West Bromwich East, well, I'm sure actually the Deputy Speaker is just as appalled as I am by all of this, but the Deputy Leader of the Labour Party, He said yesterday, "This makes for deeply shocking and depressing reading. Labour members and the Jewish community will not understand how, many years on from the first concerns about anti-Semitism being raised, we have not got to grips with it." Mr Deputy Speaker, it's profoundly shocking to me that a political party I joined as a teenager to fight racism has become embroiled in a scandal like this. It's got to be dealt with much, much more seriously. They've got to respond properly to the reasonable requests made by the Jewish community more than a year ago. They've got to boot out the racists for good. As Jonathan Goldstein said this weekend, Mr Deputy Speaker, enough is enough.
Alex Scott.